Okay, hello members. Now we are at Bob Grese's house in his beautiful garden. Many of you guys know Bob. You've seen him. He's the director of Matthew Nichols Botanical Gardens and Arboretum, but he's about to retire soon, but he is still the director during this video. Hello, Bob.
Hey, Madison.
So, tell us about your garden.
Sure. So we're standing on the west side of Ann Arbor. This is a house that I've had since bought back in 1988. Remodeled a couple of times, and over the years have created a garden. The main emphasis of the garden is native plants, but I'll show you a variety of things, including the peonies that I have at the garden here. So we're standing out at the street. When I initially moved in, these trees were pretty small, and so originally most of this was prairie that I planted back in 1989, 1990. I do get permits to burn periodically. Burned last year, not this past spring, but I burned back in 2019. And otherwise, I keep it managed through cutting back periodically.
That's really interesting. So, how do you have to go about doing a burn? Do you have to, that's really cool that you get to do it at your own house.
Yeah, I basically burn this section out here. I create a fire break along that side and burn towards the driveway. So it's pretty easy to burn, and usually you have a lot of the neighbors come out to watch.
Neat. All right.
So right now, this plant Golden Alexander is in bloom through much of the prairie space. And then this is an interesting plant called carrion flower vine, which means that it smells like carrion or roadkill when it's in bloom. It's just starting to bloom. It has these balls of flowers. It's a vine, and I train it on this post. Otherwise, it would just trail along the ground. But these are followed by blackberries.
Oh, wow.
And it's a pretty interesting plant as it comes out. And so it's kind of right here at my entrance. Some of the other things here are some roses that have just finished blooming, some meadow rose, and then a variety of prairie flowers and grasses will come up over the course of the summer. So it goes through different stages of the summer. These are some of my favorite plants here. This is called prairie dock, and it has these really giant leaves. And later in the summer, it'll send up a flower stalk about 5 to 6 feet tall.
Oh, wow.
But I just love these really big leaves and how they contrast with the other vegetation around it. So on the side of the driveway up here, when we were redoing the driveway, I wanted a place for a vegetable garden. And so on the right over here is my vegetable garden. And then on the left over here are some perennial plants that I included, including several peonies. So why don't we take a quick look at these peonies since we're in peony bloom season. So they've unfortunately bloomed really fast. Some of them, this cluster here are all historic peonies that are represented in the peony garden over at Nichols Arboretum. This one here that's somewhat faded is called Dutil. It's initially the stamens part of the flower here are bright pink and makes it a really distinctive flower. It showed up in our book, Passion for Peonies. This was bred by the breeder Edward Oughton back in the mid-1940s. It was one of his best-known flowers. It's just really striking when it comes into bloom. I just planted these last year. I got them from Hollingsworth Nursery, who was one of the people that we interviewed in the book. This other one that's a white flower here that's kind of past its peak, that one's called Mrs. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Mrs. FDR. And it's interesting that it blooms as a pink, and then it fades to white.
Oh, wow.
And so it's a really beautiful flower as it first comes into bloom. And then this other one here. The flowers have kind of drooped a bit, but this is called Festiva Maxima, which is one of the really old garden favorites. Dates back from 1851. Is considered still one of the most fragrant peonies. Several of these, particularly Mrs. FDR and Festiva Maxima, have fairly weak stems. They were bred a lot for cut flowers, and so hence I've got these wire frames that try to help support the plants. And then the rest of this bed is sort of a miscellaneous, some purple coneflowers here in the front, some sweet williams, a variety of different cultivated lilies. This is one of our rhubarb patches and our asparagus patch here in the back with some hanging strawberries from Matthew Nichols plant sale that give us a supply of strawberries all summer. And then over on this side is where we raise our vegetables. This year I wasn't really planning to plant a lot of vegetables because I thought we would travel a lot after I retired. But with COVID-19, we're pretty much going to stay here. So we've got green beans, tomato plants, some peppers, and then in the middle are some sunflowers. And it's kind of a temporary nursery for plants that we had a plant rescue, some of you remember, from over in Woodridge last fall. And in here are some native maple leaf viburnum, as well as some flowering dogwood that I'm just sort of nursing along as young plants. So anyway, it's a combination bed, and it's a good place to raise vegetables. The prairie plantings back here certainly form a good source of pollinators to help with the garden, and it's just sort of transitioning from the very early spring blooms into summer. So right now there's hairy beard's tongue in bloom over here, spiderwort just starting to come into bloom, and then there'll be a variety of other grasses and forbs in the weeks to come. Walking back towards the house.
Bob, I like these right here. Those are pretty.
Yeah, these are more sweet William.
Oh, nice.
I raised these from seeds, so they're just a mixture of different colors. They're really pretty showy, and the blooms last a long time. So,
oh, nice.
Susan's particularly favorite, or likes them a lot. So this area close to the house is more of a woodland garden. This is a rain chain that captures the rain coming down off our roof. But in through here is sort of a mixture of woodland wildflowers. This was pretty much in bloom the last few weeks with spring wildflowers, wild geranium, bloodroot, trillium, and now you see in our rain garden here the purple iris is just starting to bloom, and a number of ferns have come on. So this creates a nice viewing space from our front porch out to the road. One of the advantages of our house being set so far back from the street is that we have this real separation. It almost feels like a cottage set back from the street, and it's nice to sit back here in the evening and sort of watch the world go by.
Oh yeah, that's a great view.
And then up near the house are plants that I got from our plant sale this year in some flower boxes. And we just simply enjoy sitting out here and enjoying time. I have a lot of different trees. Many of these trees I raised from sort of young saplings. And over the last 30 years that I've been here, they've certainly grown up over time. And then back in here is sort of another small woodland garden. Originally, I planted this tulip poplar tree. That's a state tree of Tennessee, which is where I grew up. So that was somewhat special. And it's a mixture of mostly native plants. We have a number of lily of the valley that was a holdover from when I bought the property, and we've not been able to get rid of it. So it sort of stays. But and I'm growing lettuce in pots this year because the rabbits here are so abundant that can't grow it in the ground. And over down in here in front of the house, this is, well, there's some grasses that have crept in. This is mostly native sedges, and you can see a lot of little, I don't know if you can pick out these little blue flowers. That one's called blue-eyed grass. And this time of year, it's just kind of fun to have these little specks of blue across the sedge lawn in through here. So we're here in our backyard with our house set so far back from the street. We only have maybe 20 feet or so here in the back between us and our neighbor's property. And so what's nice is this has become kind of a shady retreat, that it's on the north side of the house, so it stays pretty shady most of the time. Again, we have like a little lawn of mostly sedges, and then we grow some berry shrubs. These are gooseberries over here. We have several pawpaw trees that are one of the native fruits here and over here. And then we have a raspberry patch back here and some more rhubarb. And then, of course, where we have our compost bins and just kind of a service space, collect the rainwater off the roof here. And so anyway, it's a nice compliment to be back away from the street and just sit back here pretty quietly under the shade of this oak tree.
Oh, yeah.
So this is our green roof. When we remodeled the house and we built this garage, I wanted to experiment with native plants on a green roof. And so this, our view from our bedroom window looks out here, so this is much more interesting than a blank roof. And what you see here are all native prairie plants. The yellow flowers here are lance leaf coreopsis that's in bloom right now. And it'll change over the course of the year. Many of the grasses that are up here turn color in the fall. So it's really a very nice alternative to traditional roof. And it also absorbs a lot of stormwater. So it reduces the amount of water that runs off our property. Now we're sitting up at our favorite part of the yard, and that is in the front porch. We tend to spend a lot of time here just sitting back, watching the world go by. And it's peaceful. As you can tell, we get a lot of birds around here. And in another couple of weeks or so, we should have lots of fireflies that come out of the yard every night. So it's a really a delightful place to sit. And so anyway, just thought it was useful to end here, and thought I would share a little bit about our book, The Passion for Peonies, which David and Michener and I started talking about a couple of years ago together with some editors from the University of Michigan Press. Our intent was to have a book in hand for the 100th anniversary of the garden in 2022. Turns out that the timetable for publishing, once we realized they weren't going to send the book to China to be printed, was much quicker coming printed in Canada. And so we were able to have it out for sale this year, which turned out great given that we were disinviting people from come to see the garden in person to at least have this book. And so what we attempted to do here was to celebrate the history of the peony garden, as well as to celebrate the overall history of the peony as a flower in people's garden, as a cultural icon, as something that's been celebrated in art. And so we brought together a series of historical writings, invited people to write articles about conservation of peonies as historic plants, and brought them together in one book. And then one of the fun things for me was that knowing how ants crawl across peonies, if you notice from even the first page, there's an ant crawling, and the ants crawl across the full book.
Oh,
and then
cute.
only on the last page do you get to read as to why ants crawl on peonies. And I'm not going to tell you why. You'd have to buy the book to find out.
Oh, I love that. Well, Bob, thank you so much for bringing us into your garden, sharing the book, showing us your peonies. This has been really awesome and special. It's a beautiful space.
Well, thank you, Madison. It's been great fun to be able to share with people.